Hi, everyone. I'm here to talk a bit about a topic that's probably close to everyone's hearts, especially right now, which is about build versus buy decisions. So I think that especially in this kind of post-ZERP era that we're all kind of living through, I think we're feeling the resource constraints on our teams and thinking more about what can we outsource? What do we need to put our chips on? Like what bets do we need to place as a team? So I think this is a pretty perennial debate that happens, so much so that I'm not sure if everyone saw this recently, but there was a lot of kind of heated debate on Twitter, one might say, especially about cloud services and, should we be building authentication? Should we be outsourcing that? I think it's a very, very interesting topic. And basically today I wanted to dive in a little bit more to explain some of the ways that I think about making build versus buy decisions on my team, as well as we're actually kind of in an interesting position as both a vendor and a buyer, and some of the observations that we've had from making some of these decisions and being around some companies that have had to make them as well. So I think we would probably all agree that there are some pretty clear-cut choices when it comes to what you might build and what you might buy, right? So I think scale is a nuance here that's probably very important for a lot of people in this room as well. I'm sure that there's folks who would say, no, we absolutely must run our own databases and we absolutely must run our own hardware in a rack because of reasons. But I think for a lot of us, infrastructure, outsourcing servers, databases, data pipelines, things like that, usually aren't too core to our business, and it's a really easy way for us to think about outsourcing. I think there's other topics here around highly regulated industries, so you can think about payments. I'm sure most of us don't want to touch credit card data and have that liability on our business. So again, kind of an easy place to think about shifting that outside of your business. I think security tooling is a really interesting one. I think that there's a lot of advantage here in actually thinking about other folks doing that hard work for you and being the experts in security so you can outsource that and not have to think about that. But the interesting part here is what about the application layer? So over the last kind of 5 years, I think we've seen this really big proliferation of application layer startups. So you can think about people like WorkOS, who are a sponsor here, Clerk, who were mentioned in those previous slides, usage-based billing, notifications, which is what we do at Knock, feature flag and admin tools. This is just a short list. And I think you look at this list and there's a lot of people probably in this room who have built parts of this or who are maintaining these systems today. And I think that there's a lot of nuance in what you should actually think about adopting and building in-house versus what you should actually think about purchasing and using a vendor for. So I wanted to kind of spend a little bit of time thinking about a framework that might help you think through some of these more application layer build versus buy decisions today. So yeah, we can all build this stuff, right? You probably have a bunch of fantastic engineers, or you're fantastic engineers yourselves. And that means that with enough time and resources, we can effectively build anything on that list. But yeah, the question should become, should we do that? What's important to our business? What do we actually want to focus our energies on? So I think about this in a few ways. I think about differentiation, security and compliance, cost and margin, reliability and scalability, criticality of the service, and roadmap and development time. And just to get into a bit of this, so on the first one around differentiation, I like to think, is this a competency that we want to develop internally? Do we actually want to be really good at this thing? And not just from a standpoint of do I want to train some engineers to build it and operate it and maintain it, but does this actually move the needle for the business? Does building here help us win in the market, right? So I think maybe this is probably the take that you see most often about competency and what should we do here. I think security and compliance is really interesting. So is it critical for us to own this and to operate it? And does it help us fulfill our obligations to our customers? Are we kind of increasing or decreasing our risk profile by adopting this service or building this thing in-house? cost and margin is another really interesting aspect here. So thinking about, can we actually afford to outsource this? Like, if we do so and they charge so much for the service, does that eat into our margin such that we actually cannot afford to run this, you know? And then what does it look like building, operating, and maintaining this in-house if we were going to build it versus actually buying from a vendor here? Reliability and scalability is really interesting. Like, I think that there can be parts of your stack that will scale very differently to others. Like, we think about this a lot with notifications where, like, maybe it's super high volume and you're actually, other parts of your infrastructure are much lower volume. So therefore, it might be a good area to actually outsource rather than think about building and operating yourselves. And then criticality. So is this on the revenue path? Like, if we actually did outsource this area, is that going to affect our business if that vendor's down? If we're relying on a third-party SaaS vendor to do something that's maybe on the authorization path or something like that, does outsourcing that actually increase our risk of downtime and affect our SLAs and availability guarantees? And then the last one I like is just roadmap and development time. So what else could we be doing with this time, right? Like, where else could we be spending those engineering chips if we're not doing this? I wanted to give some tips on some of this, like running a build versus buy process as well, from being on the other side, as I said. So I think the first one is getting clarity on the scope of the build. So what does it actually look like to build it if you're not going to buy it? Like, really digging into the epic planning, do the roadmap planning, think about the service over the first 3 months. What does a 6-month goal look like if you're building out like an authentication service, or you're building out like a payment or usage-based billing service? And then maybe sometimes there, like, it's better to spike on some parts of it and building more of a tracer bullet so you can understand what that cost might actually be. I really like this one around building vendor non-negotiables. So thinking about like what's actually important to your organization. So if you had a one-pager where you could actually start dequalifying vendors immediately, so thinking about like maybe security and compliance is like so important to your organization that on that first vendor evaluation call that you're having with someone, like you could dequalify them instantly because they don't have SOC 2 or HIPAA or something more like that. Everyone hates doing RFPs. Like, we hate it as a vendor, everyone hates running it, but I do think it's actually a very important part of this process. I think like the key thing here, though, is making sure that you've picked real use cases. The worst RFPs that we see are the ones where you're kind of just like, it needs to do X, and it's the most generic thing, and it doesn't really move the needle or think like what you actually need this vendor to actually do as a service. And you might want to think about breaking out more of the like nice-to-haves versus the must-haves there as well. And then, yeah, doing an actual vendor shootout as well, I think is really important. You might be best friends with someone who's got a company that does something in this space, and you might be like, they're going to be the ones that I'm going to choose. But I think it's still really important to go through the process with multiple vendors and then weigh it up against the kind of build process as well. Just even if it just helps reaffirm your position. But it will allow you to learn more about the space and understand more about the market and which tools are stronger than others. Yeah, and then tips on what to look for in a vendor. So I really like this first one around customer and scale likeness. So I think to de-risk some of the process of working with a third party, if they have customers who look similar to you, and at least at the similar scale to you, I think that really helps kind of build this consensus internally and think about like, yes, they could be a good fit. And the other thing there is actually getting on the horn and talking to those customers that vendor has, right? Like actually go in, do the test, like get a testimonial from someone who looks like you or has a similar scale to you. Velocity and responsiveness. How much do they ship, right? If you've got a roadmap of features that you want this vendor to actually enact, like how fast are they going to get to that? Are they someone who moves quickly? You can see it in their change log. You can kind of see how fast they are. You can see how fast they respond in a shared Slack channel to your responses, things like that. And then vision alignment. So thinking about like, how do they see the world? How do they think about this space that you are buying? Does it align to what features that you want to deliver over the long term? Does it align to the capabilities that you want to add? And is the roadmap there going to help in other ways? And then last but not least, finding a partner. We think about this a lot, where we want to help others understand more about their notifications, how they can deliver best in class, what best in class looks like, maybe jump into like product requirement docs and things like that. So just like they are a vendor, but you really want them to be that partner more so than you want them to be a vendor. Cool, that's it. That's all I have. But if you have any questions, I'll be at the booth as well. So thank you.